Hi, friends. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your practice. As always, I hope this finds you in good health and secure. One of you sent me a link to a, not sure what to call it. It's part interview, part song performance from Peter Gabriel. And Peter Gabriel, if you don't know him, and you probably should if you look into him. He's long been, he's one of us old timers. He's long been a humanist, a humanitarian, and his lyrics have always been either about compassionate investigation into either certain, how to say it, social events of our day, our time, sometimes specific, somebody who's been wronged in a large political scheme, and many times much more general, about the human psyche. You could say a lot of songwriting is about this, but Peter has been very specific, and again, from a point of view that's very humanist. And he's not the only one, but this recent song in his tour, his album, centers around something that the person who sent this to me noticed mirrors a lot of the things that we talk about on this channel, having to do with energy and our construct, not being independent from the universe as a whole, but rather being just a collection of, or a focal point, or an amalgam, as I say, that's not his words, mine, of these multitudinous instantiations that are the universe. We seem to just be a collecting point. And as this song is titled I.O., Input Output, and he has a lyric in it, and I apologize if I'm not quoting it perfectly, but and you'll hear the lyric if you go to see this. I should actually put that link in the description. I will endeavor to do that. It says that we are input output. We are a part of. And even the English words imply separation. What he's saying is that there isn't any. That we are part of everything. Everything is part of us. You've heard me say this. I've quoted songs from Motown that say this. You are everything. Everything is you. Yeah, right? That old song. But it's cool. It's cool. Thank you for sending me the link. It's very, whether Peter Gabriel is a Buddhist, practices Buddhism, certainly he's aware of Buddhism. But what it reminded me of is that all of us, at some point in our life, maybe it takes 60 years of experiencing this life to sort through in the background in our minds what is truth, what isn't, what is value, what isn't, what is human, what isn't. In a way, I think just surviving in this human life, one gradually moves toward enlightenment. But that's not necessarily true for everyone. I think that is a potential for some, but I think it requires, and I think Peter is an example of this, that we ask ourselves these bigger questions early on. And we become people who don't just accept things on their face, on their superficial values or presentations, that we are more curious than that. And that when we meet things that don't agree with us, rather than rebelling against, you're not like me, you must be bad. See, we're taught, that's actually a taught behavior. A lot of, and I'm not going to get into my popular rants on that, but suffice it to say there are a lot of influences, especially, well, they've always been there, but certainly with the proliferation of opinions and mechanisms in our world today, those that are seeking their own empowerment and control offer up information, rhetoric, propaganda that is the paradigm, if you will, of us and them, self and other. They really, really seize on that in order to manipulate people's emotions to take a side, as it were. And as Buddhists, certainly, but as day-to-day human beings, we really, really need to create a force field around our minds, our thinking, that holds that at bay, so that we can examine it with a safe distance and see what it is that it's attempting to do. Because the truth always is that what separates us is so minute and to the point of being completely unimportant. Mosquito. Go on now. To let it overtake our experience of life is an extremely dangerous thing. It leads to a lot of lower worlds, right? It puts us in the realms of animality. We should endeavor always to distance ourselves from anything that creates polarity, to understand that polarity is just two sides of the same thing. Positive, negative aren't fighting one another. That's a political construct. Right? There can be no negative without a positive. There can be no positive without a negative. That's not to say there needs to be struggle. What I'm identifying is that those are really two aspects of the same thing. We need more unity in our thinking, less division in our thinking, because what divides us is truly minimal. Truly. And in fact, if we identify something that seems like a division, seems like other, our natural response should be curiosity to find why that barrier exists in our mind. Because in truth, whatever, we're fond of saying, well, that's over there, or that's not my problem. Right? That's division. When people are struggling in other places, or even as we know one another, your situation, my situation, differ, but your situation and my situation only differ for this moment, right? Momentum, moments. That all that potential exists within me and within you. It's just a matter of expression, whether expressed within ourselves and our minds, which we understand as Buddhists, is not separate from our environment. So if somebody is experiencing insecurity and pain in some part of the world where I am not, if my attention is called to it, I understand that that is just as much me as it is theirs. The potential for the struggle they're experiencing exists within me. How can I connect with that person or those people to inculcate whatever fortune I have in my situation, in my energy, to somehow connect that with the energy of throughout the universe and somehow protect, mollify, bring to bear the precious, amazing experience of life without those conditions, mollify those conditions, move those tendencies toward, even within the conditions that are not life-affirming, build life affirmation to the point where I influence the world around me to, at some point, affect, influence those others. Because whatever their strife is also within me. This is a unity of thinking. That when we see something that's disparate from ourselves, we think it's disparate from ourselves, we need to identify that what we're doing is separating ourselves. And that's the wrong energy. We are not separate. Maybe through physical space-time we appear to be separate, but in actual fact, moment to moment, the universe is recreating itself moment to moment to moment, and we are simply a part of that expression. So if there's an expression occurring somewhere else, even if it's next door, that doesn't mirror our own, we think it doesn't mirror our own, but in fact, it's just expressing an aspect that we too have within us. The fact that we're not going through that condition at the moment is something to truly appreciate. But not to appreciate as, I have security and you don't. But to truly appreciate it on a level that says, I appreciate it enough to empower it to be mirrored in my environment, and you are part of my environment, so that your karma should be influenced by this as I empower it. See, this is where people get confused, though, and I want to say, well, isn't that chanting for others? That's what you might say, yes. Isn't this how you chant for others? And I've addressed this several times, but the words they get mushy, yeah? If you empower, celebrate, invoke the conditions and tendencies of your Buddhahood in your life, in the realm of enlightenment in your life, then your environment is automatically affected. Like I use words like radiate or aura or influence, that your life energy, right, excites that same positivity, that same enlightenment within your environment. Think of it like a magnetic field, electromagnetic field, yeah? You affect, and your environment mirrors that which you give most energy to. So if we focus our energy on enlightenment, then too our environment is affected. And the whole practice of bodhisattva, right, which Shakyamuni tells us, if you want to experience perfect and complete enlightenment, not just a warm fuzzy feeling for yourself, but this expansive experience of life at a whole, then it's the bodhisattva effort that accomplishes this. And what does that mean? It means that you radiate this magnificent enlightenment energy into your environment or within. See, your environment isn't separate from you. So if you glow here, then the glowing potential occurs around you. How could that not include your neighbors, your friends, your population? Because all of us are that energy. Yeah? It's like, this is a terrible example, but it's like a tug of war. You ever had a tug of war? Bunch of people grab a rope, right? And another bunch of people, hopefully similarly equal in potential on the other side of the rope, and you pull against each other to see who will cross some line that you make in the middle of you. It requires all of you to pull on that rope. If one of you is doing all the pulling, the others will win. If one of you gives up over here, then you have less strength on the side of your side of the rope, and the others will have more, and therefore you'll be drawn into their realms. And do you understand what I'm saying? This life is very much a push-pull. It's taking responsibility for the energy, the type of energy that we manifest in each moment. We can sit back and just watch the default, or we can get active within it and create, actually pull from potential, more manifestation of enlightenment, the affirmation of life throughout the universe. But we don't do that solipsistically in this little shell of our body. Our body is the body universe. And so, of course, we influence the world around us. So this is what's interesting, knowing this kind of Buddhist thinking, to hear Peter Gabriel talk about I/O, input, output. I am actually integrated, part and parcel of what I think of as everything is no different than what I think of as I. That the two are actually not just interrelated, but just the same thing. We're the interface of life, the I/O. It's a brilliant concept. And I don't say that Peter is unique to this, but the one unique thing about Peter Gabriel is that he can put these thoughts into words that are rather universal, that everyone can use in their day-to-day understanding of the world. So thanks for sharing the link and creating the foundation for this conversation. In the context of the series we're in the middle of on Nichiren being distinct about Mandala and Gohonzon, you very much, I could make an analogy to this series from this same discussion of Peter Gabriel's song, and that is that the understanding of everythingness that we are the interface of is Gohonzon. The interface, the method by which with our minds we're able to experience that truth, that is something we must call forth, because it's not our de facto, we want it to be our de facto mind. But our de facto mind is physical attachment. So we need to transmigrate from that physical attachment universe, understanding, experience, and penetrate this greater portal of energy, light, community, the engine of life. What takes us there, that transmigratory tool, is the mandala. And the moment we get on that mandala, we're no longer in the mandala, we are in Gohonzon, right? It's kind of like having a surfboard. The surfboard doesn't do anything for you, but you go out in the ocean with it, and you catch a wave, and you stand up on the surfboard. It's no longer about the surfboard, or you for that matter. It's your experience of surfing. The surfboard is a critical tool to help you do that. But the surfboard isn't doing the surfing. You're doing the surfing. The surfing is the experience that you want to have and hang on to and are excited by, right? Enlightenment is like that. Enlightenment is always there. Surfing occurs. But are you experiencing it? It's very hard to do by yourself. You need a tool. The tool helps you to arrive at the experience. Mandala, tool, Gohonzon, experience. Yeah, it's really simple, right? People get very confused about it. So let's continue with the opening of the eyes. Nichiren goes on and says, in volume 5 of the Great Concentration and Insight, one of Tendai's great treatises, says, quote, these days there are many devilish monks who break the precepts and return to lay life. Fearing that they will be punished for their actions, they then go over to the side of the Taoists. Hoping to gain fame and profit, there it is again, they speak extravagantly of the merits of Lao Tzu and Chuang Tzu, usurping Buddhist concepts and reading them into their erroneous scriptures. And just picking and choosing and creating their own, isn't this wonderful, isn't this wonderful? And it becomes mysticism, magical. They just pick and choose from the salad bar what salad they want to make, and then they proclaim their salad to be superior. It's capitalism at its finest, right? They twist what is lofty and force it into a mean context. They destroy what is exalted and drag it down among the base, striving to put the two on an equal level. End quote. Have you ever been there? I've certainly known people like this. They can be very exciting. They put things together. Today we have a name for it in certain circles, like pseudoscience, right? We'll use these brilliant scientific terms and we'll put them on a roast beef sandwich and we'll make this a holy thing. It's that ridiculous, really, when you dig into it. On Great Concentration and Insight, comments on this passage as follows. Quote, though they are monks, they destroy the teachings of Buddhism. Some break the precepts and return to lay life as Wei Wansheng did. Then, as laymen, they work to destroy the teachings of Buddhism. Men of this kind steal and usurp the correct teachings of Buddhism and use them to supplement and bolster the erroneous writings. The passage on twisting what is lofty means that adopting the outlook of the Taoists, they try to place Buddhism and Taoism on the same level, to make equals of the correct and the erroneous, though reason tells us that this could never be. Having once been followers of Buddhist teachings, they steal what is correct and use it to bolster what is incorrect. They twist the lofty 80,000 teachings of the 12 divisions of Buddhist canon and force them into the mean context of Lao Tzu's 2 chapters and 5,000 words, using them to interpret the base and mistaken teachings of that text. This is what is meant by destroying what is exalted and dragging it down among the base. These comments should be carefully noted, for they explain the meaning of the foregoing description of events. And I want those of you to understand who've commented to me about those times when I talk about other organizations or sects of Buddhism. I use Nichiren as my model. And Nichiren was surrounded by Buddhism his whole life. Japan was Buddhist in his time. But it wasn't the correct teachings of Shakyamuni's Buddhism. These other sects that Nichiren's constantly pointing out, he's doing so with a critical compassion to demonstrate to those who would follow those teachers that they have construed Buddhism in a way to enable them to be rich, powerful, privileged, not the goal of Buddhism at all. And in so doing, they've misrepresented the ultimate teachings of Shakyamuni's Buddhism. The whole reason Shakyamuni taught Buddhism was that every one of us, no matter what level of society, caste in the system, blah, 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 that anyone could attain this enlightenment, this experience, this totality of experience of life, freeing ourselves from the bondage of the fake limitations we put upon ourselves. Not that the pain we feel is fake, but that the pain we feel is a result of our belief, our investment in what causes the pain. That investment made of attachment, collecting, owning, our very identity being a representation of our possessions rather than being a representation of this moment-to-moment life. That's a critical paradigm shift. And depending on where you are in your life, can be extremely difficult to accomplish. And in the Lotus Sutra, we get that, drop the mic moment from Shakyamuni. Hey, look, all you need to do is instantiate it. Here's how you do that, no matter what your life condition. Myoho Renge Kyo. I am Myoho Renge Kyo. Na-mu Myoho Renge Kyo. Experience it. Do it more and more, and you just like training in anything. You want to be a good cook? You got to do a lot of cooking. You will realize your inner cook. Not your inner cook because it's hidden somewhere behind an organ, but because it's always there. That potential has always been there. It just hasn't been exercised. That's the whole thing here. Right? But somebody who likes all of the wonderful storytelling and the analogies and so forth of Buddhism says, well, that kind of gives everyone their own power. They don't need me. See, the ego gets involved and says, well, how can I make these people dependent upon me? Well, I'll show them that they're not qualified to be Buddhas unless they do these various things that I'll suggest to them they have to accomplish. And then they'll come to me in order to be validated that they can actually enlighten themselves. Ooh, the power. And Nichiren rightfully calls that out and says, that's not Buddhism. That's just ego. That's just manipulation. That's the world of anger. Animality. Those are lower realms. Yeah? So again, in another way, he's saying exactly that. The same sort of thing, he goes on, happened within Buddhism itself. Buddhism was introduced to China during the Yongping era, Common Era 58 to 75, of the latter Han Dynasty, and in time established its supremacy over Confucian and Taoist teachings. It was far more profound. But differences of opinion developed within Buddhism, resulting in the 3 schools of the South and the 7 schools of the North, which sprang up here and there like so many orchids or chrysanthemums in the time of Chen and Sui dynasties. However, the great teacher Chi-Che defeated these various schools and returned Buddhism once more to its primary objective of saving all living beings, sentient beings. That was the goal from the start. And here he is, Nichiren, saying the same thing. There's like this purging that needs to happen every so often that gets rid of these egotistical deviations, deviance being the operative word, and returning to the core. Later, the teachings of the Dharma characteristics and true word schools were introduced from India, and the flower garland school also made its appearance. Among these schools, the Dharma characteristics school set itself up as an arch opponent of the Tendai school. What? See, you should be questioning that right away. Because their teachings are as contradictory to each other as fire is to water. However, when Tripitaka master Xuanzang and great teacher Chuen closely examined the works of Tendai, they came to realize that the views of their own schools were in error. Although they did not openly repudiate their own school, it appears that in their hearts they switched their allegiance to the Tendai's teachings. From the beginning, the Flower Garland and True Word schools were both provisional schools based upon provisional sutras, right? Just steps along expanding our understanding. But the Tripitaka masters Shan Wu Wei and Chi Chang Chi, who introduced the esoteric True Word teachings to China, usurped the Tendai doctrine of the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment of life and made it the core of the teachings of their school, adding the practice of mudras and mantras, hand positions, right? We read quite a bit about that. They invented chapters to insert into the Lotus Sutra to demonstrate that it actually belonged to their True Word teachings. Is really... It could be the subject of a movie. It's almost like espionage, yeah? That their teachings surpassed Tendai's. As a result, students of Buddhism, unaware of the real facts, came to have confidence that the doctrine of the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment of life was to be found in the Mahavajrayana Sutra, which it never was. That had been brought from India. Similarly, in the time of the Flower Garland patriarch Cheng Quan, the Tendai doctrine of the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life was surreptitiously incorporated and used to interpret the passage in the Flower Garland Sutra that reads, quote, "The mind is like a skilled painter." People were unaware that this was what had happened. Now, I'll pause for a moment here to remind you, I've said this before, Shakyamuni never deviated in his teachings. So certainly, the ultimate goal of his teaching was present in some form in every one of his teachings. But until people's conscious minds were trained to look at how the mind works in the body of the universe, that first of all, we're not separate into ourselves entity. Hell, our samsaric mind doesn't allow that to happen anyway. Our identity, our very samsaric identity, is based upon everything that we are not, and somehow abstractly, as a possession, becomes an identifier of who we are. It's a real self-deception. When the truth is always there, that we are alive just as the universe is alive. We are experiencing life writ large from a, albeit personal perspective, that doesn't change what we're seeing. It changes our seeing, our being. Not what we are, which is already a stop. A hard stop in time is no longer valid, right? That's gone. Because we're constantly moving through time, creating it, as it were. So yeah, it wouldn't be too difficult if you were clever with words to pick out sentences in earlier sutras and say, see, there it is. Well, you only even know to look at those words or interpret those words in that way because you've learn the later teachings, right? Until you read the Lotus Sutra and you really get the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment of life, it doesn't occur to you to think that. Now you can go all the way back through all of their earlier teachings and say, oh, there it is. It's hidden in this story of a turtle. There it is. So we're going to practice this because it's all there. No. And that is a bad teacher because they're working in contradiction to the whole 50 years of Shakyamuni's teachings. Over and over again this happens in Buddhism. We've got to get these egomaniacs out of the way so we can simply see the truth for ourselves. In the case of our own country of Japan, he's talking now, the flower garland and other schools that comprised the 6 schools of Nara were introduced to Japan before the Tendai, or Tendai's teachings, and the true word schools. So the flower garland, 3 treatises, and Dharma characteristic schools argued and contended as inimical to one another as water and fire. So what he's saying is that while in China, these usurpers of power and ego were busy creating their own artifice of Buddhist teachings for their own purposes, that's what migrated to Japan. Lotus Sutra teachings, Tendai's elucidation on Lotus Sutra teachings hadn't reached Japan yet. So right away, the experience of quote-unquote Buddhism in Japan was defiled. But Japanese didn't know that, right? It wasn't until later that Tendai teachings arrive in Japan. And that should have cleared up the whole mess. And it did for a while with Dengyo. But after Dengyo's death, people, egos, they rise up again, right? So I'm sure he's going to talk about this. The flower garland treatise of Trema argued, contended, fire. When the great teacher Dengyo, there it is, appeared in Japan, he not only exposed the errors of the 6 schools, but also made it clear that the true word school had stolen the principles of the Lotus Sutra as expounded by Tendai and made them the heart of the teachings of its own school, while adding a bunch of other erroneous crap to it. It wasn't the true teaching. The great teacher Dengyo set aside the various tenets propounded by the leaders of these other schools and, solely in the light of the sutras, attacked their views. He demonstrated Shakyamuni's own words tore them apart. But see, you have to be literate and well-read in order to make those arguments. And then everyone who's not privileged, schooled into understanding or even having access to these teachings will look and think and go, oh, that's really reasonable. You're right. But if you're ignorant, you don't know. You rely on your teachers to tell you the truth, yeah? As a result, he was able to defeat 8 eminent monks of the 6 schools and 12 monks, then 14, then over 300, as well as the great teacher Kobo, great because of his influence. Soon there was not a single person in all of Japan who did not acknowledge allegiances to the Tendai school and the great temples of Nara. Toji and the other temples throughout all the provinces became subordinate to the head temple of the Tendai school at Mount Hiei. The great teacher Dengyo also made it clear that the founders of the various schools, other schools in China, by acknowledging allegiance to the doctrines of Tendai, had escaped committing the error of slandering the correct teachings of Buddhism. I'm going to pause there. So, Nichiren is, in the scope of this letter, demonstrating that there's historical precedent for this purging of corruption over time that always would come back to the essential teaching. the self-realized Buddhahood. Yeah? That we may put our hands together like this to indicate an expectation. But in truth, in Buddhism, we put our palms together and fold our hands. Why? Do you see how integral a unit that makes? This is self-enlightenment. This is praying and wishing. That's not Buddhism. That's religion. That's hoping that some mystical other will somehow save you. And that rhetoric penetrates in these English translations quite a lot, doesn't it? But that's not Buddhism. Buddhism is, let me manifest for myself that which is already what constructs me and the entire universe, without the avarice, greed, and necessity of hanging on to the past, hanging on to possessions. Because in truth, as an enlightened being, everything is being in every moment. There's no question of possession. We are all occurring at the same moment, moment to moment to moment, right? Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. So I may say thank you in order for you to recognize my appreciation for your sentient mind. But as Buddhists, to manifest our Buddha, thank you for your practice. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Yeah? Little things like that. I'm not trying to teach mudras and mantras. I'm just saying, symbolically, our samsaric environment is always a reflection of our mindset. And so we have to be careful. How do we express our mindset of Buddhahood, of enlightenment, of equanimity? Yeah. Should always be on our minds. Not only for ourselves, but as we do so for ourselves, we perceive the behaviors in our environment through that lens. Critically important. Because through that lens, we are not divided. We may see things we've not experienced for ourselves, but that's not because we don't have that potential. We just haven't nurtured that potential. And it may be that we need compassion to help others nurture their enlightenment potential to quell that other potential that's creating so much suffering for them. How do we do that? Simply by strengthening our Buddhahood. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Please keep your practice strong. Stay healthy and safe. Use the resources. And while you're at it, like and subscribe to grow this resource. Right? It's a bodhisattva act. And if you can, patrons out there, those who buy books, ebooks, print books, donate through PayPal or Patreon, we're all grateful to you. Keep this resource growing, yeah? Give me your suggestions, email me, comment. Once again, keep your practice strong, and I will see you in the next one. All right? Bye for now.